Welcome to H-Frame, the only comprehensive, completely unofficial guide to vintage Black & Decker Workmates. The website is hframe with a hyphen .weebly.com, where you will find my in-depth documentation, over 60 web pages, over 100 PDF documents, over 500 photographs, and still growing. Subject of this video is the Workmate 79-001 Type 4, which was the third Workmate made in North America for the United States and Canadian markets from June 1977 to October 1978. My website has much more background info about the early Workmates, and my videos for the Type E, Type 1, and Type 2 also have info about earlier features that carry through to the Type 4. So if you're particularly interested in the Type 4, you will probably want to see those earlier videos also. The 79001 Type 4 is the second most commonly found 79001 today, making up roughly 20% of the 79001s out there. The most common is the Type 2, accounting for roughly 45% of 79001s. So together, the Type 2 and Type 4 make up almost 2/3 of all 79001s. So if you have a 79001 with no type marking, how can you identify it as a Type 4? You do it by the combination of three components: the double layer jaws with 2 layers of plywood along the edge where the jaws meet each other, the rear jaw pivot nuts made of plastic rather than aluminum, and the slip-on rubber boot feet on 3 of the legs. A Workmate that has all of these components is a Type 4. I'll show you close-ups of those components in a few minutes. When the 79001 Type 4 started production on June 21st, 1977, it was extremely similar to the Type 2 with only 3 changes. Before I show you the changes on the Type 4, let me backtrack a little to talk about the Type 2. There were 5 changes made to the Type 2 during its last 5 months of production from February through June 1977. I described those changes in my video for the Type 2, but I was unable to show those to you because the Type 2 I had for that video was manufactured in 1976 before those changes were made. So let's start by taking a look at those changes as they can be seen on this Type 4. That will show you what those parts of a late production Type 2 would look like. The vice handle arms that were originally made of aluminum changed to this plastic, now with this hollow plastic knob. Unlike the earlier handles, these knobs were supplied with a new Workmate in a parts bag to be installed by the new owner, rather than being assembled at the factory. The left and right upper frame assemblies were painted gray to match the rest of the frame, so the entire steel frame is now painted. The bushings at the pivot points of the H-frames were changed from steel to white nylon, probably to reduce possible damage to the newly painted upper frame components. Fourth change, the maximum jaw opening increased from 4 inches to 5.5 inches, thanks to this longer guide slot for the movable jaw in the upper frame pieces, combined with the longer vice screw, which now comes within about 2 inches of the end of the frame. For the fifth change, I'll have to turn the Workmate over. With the Workmate upside down, we will take a look at the inner spring steel clip that holds the folding legs in the closed position. During production of the Type 2, that clip changed from what had been a smooth, full half circle to this clip that has a couple of slight bends in it and is a little bit shorter. It doesn't make the full half circle. This change made the clip less susceptible to damage. While we're looking at the bottom, I'll point out the type marking stamped in ink on the bottom of the jaws, and also the production code stamped on the jaws, where the 81123 means this Workmate was made in 1978, the 11th week, the second day of that week, during the third shift, which works out to March 13th, 1978. On a personal note, I'll tell you that this Workmate is my original Workmate. It's given to me as a gift in the summer of 1978, and I have had it for 45 years. So that sums up the 5 changes that were all introduced during production of the Type 2 and continued as standard on the Type 4. The last few months of production of the Type 2 can be difficult to distinguish from Type 4s. With that review of the features of the late Type 2s complete, let's see the 3 changes that became standard at the introduction of the Type 4, things that make the Type 4 different from the Type 2. You can see those on this Type 4. The white and orange label on the jaws of the Type 2 was replaced by this silver and black one that has both the model and the type number. One thing you should notice is the change in name. While the labels on the Type E, Type 1, and Type 2 simply call it the Workmate, the Type 4 label says Deluxe Dual Height Workmate. This reflects the fact that by 1977, the 79-001 had been joined on the US market by a couple of smaller single height models with many more variations to come over the next 3 years. The other 2 changes I referred to earlier, one of those is the rear jaw pivot nut that the vice screw threads into. This was a 2-piece aluminum assembly on earlier Workmates, but was simplified to this single black plastic part on the Type 4. This was clearly a cost reduction step, both in materials and assembly time. Type 4 lost some adjustability as the 3 of the screw-in feet on the legs were replaced by slip-on rubber boots. One screw-in foot remains at the right rear leg. The feet on the corners, the 4 corners of the frame for sawhorse height are still all the screw-in style. As with the Type 2, there were additional parts changes during production of the Type 4. In October 1977, this was not a change in the Workmate itself, but a change in the style of the swivel grips. The gripping faces were enlarged slightly, and small wings were added to the top edges, as you can see here, making the grips easier to pull out of the top of the Workmate. Type 4 has the distinction of being the Workmate that was in production when Black & Decker replaced the aluminum H-frames with steel ones. This happened not quite halfway through the production run of the Type 4 in December 1977. This one was made in March 1978, so it has the steel H-frames. The change to the H-frames prompted a labeling change, with the crossbar of the front H-frame sporting an all-new label identifying the model, but not the type. Notice that it shows the same deluxe dual height designation as the label on the jaws. When the H-frames on the Type 4 changed, there was an interesting divergence between the US and Canadian models. Up through December 1977, the 79001 was sold in both countries with no differences between them. When the 79001 Type 4 changed to the steel H-frames in the United States, the 79001 was actually discontinued in Canada. Replacing the 79001 in Canada only was the new model 79005 Type 1 with steel H-frames, which was essentially the US 79001 Type 4 as you see it here, but with different labeling. Apparently, the Canadian marketing group thought that the change in H-frames was sufficiently major to warrant a full model change. From 1978 to 1982, the US model 79001 continued progressing through types 6 through 9, while the 79005 paralleled it with the equivalent types 2 through 5. I have a page at my website all about the 79005. So the change in the H-frames was the major one for the Type 4, but there were a few more to come. The rest of the changes to the Type 4 occurred after the Type 4 that I just showed you was made. So I'm going to show them to you on this Type 6 that was made just over a year later than that Type 4 was. In May and June of 1978, the H-frame bushings changed from the white nylon that was introduced on the Type 2 to the black nylon you see here. Production changed back and forth a few times for about 8 weeks before sticking with the black ones. I would guess this change was made because they found a cheaper supplier. Oddly, the white ones showed up again for a couple of weeks 3 years later in 1981 on some Type 8s. During the week of July 17th, 1978, the two clips that hold the Workmate in the folded position changed from the original complex riveted two-piece design with hooks to this single flat piece of metal with a few bends in it. That's the view from the inside of the frame. And This is what it looks like from the outside of the frame. This would clearly have been a cost reduction measure. During that same week in July 1978, the two top release levers changed from the original metal to this black plastic one. There's a thin, flexible finger you can see at the front end of it that provides the spring return function for the lever that was originally supplied by a metal coil spring. It's somewhat common for that finger or even some other part of the plastic lever to break after decades of use, and original replacements are not available. The attachment for the lever changed as well, using a hex head screw threaded directly into the frame. Again, a cost savings, both because a single plastic part replaced a steel lever and a metal coil spring, and because it would have reduced assembly time. In late September 1978, from this point on, the 79001 no longer had its model and type number on a label on the top of the jaws. The Type 4's rectangular silver and black label with that information was replaced by this smaller, square, transparent one with only the caution statement, patent information, and company name. Nothing specific to this Workmate. Variations of this transparent label were used on all subsequent 79001s and also appeared on other models of Workmate. The labels are differentiated mostly by the number of patent numbers listed for the United States. On the Type 4, as you see here, it has only one patent number at the end of that line where it says United States. During October 1978, the final month of production for the Type 4, some 79001s were produced with revised legs that feature surface-mounted rubber bumper feet that then became standard on the Type 6 the following month. In this video, I'll make specific references to both the Type 2 that preceded the Type 4 and the Type 6 that followed it, so you may find it helpful to watch the videos about those types as well. And that statement should make you wonder why I'm not comparing the 79001 Type 4 to the Type 3 and Type 5. The reason is that for the US market, the 79001 Type 3 and Type 5 were sort of fill-in models made in Ireland, not at the Brockville factory, and sold in small numbers. As such, they didn't share any parts with the Workmates from Brockville. Check my website or my video about the Type 3 and 5 for the details. So that's it for my examination of the Black & Decker 79001 Type 4 Workmate. You can find much more about the Type 4 and all of the early Workmates at my website, including such things as owner's manuals, part diagrams, catalog and newspaper appearances, as well as discoveries I've made that are not documented anywhere else. Thanks for watching.